episode of The Toolshed. The Toolshed podcast is all about finding people, finding services, finding support that help pretty much every part of the building industry, the construction industry. One of the big challenges that I found many moons ago when I started working specifically in the building industry that I really wasn't aware, and it came to me as a big shock about the level, the depth of mental health issues that there are in the building industry. And we came to the conclusion some time ago that it just didn't matter how good our coaching was. It didn't matter what information that we were passing on to our members. If they were being challenged by some sort of mental health, emotional challenges, whatever it might be, they are very distracted. It's very difficult to put this stuff into practice. So we're always trying to find people and services and tools to be able to support everybody in the building industry to be able to deal with these sorts of challenges and be able to build the business and live the life that you kind of started your business for in the first place. And it gives me great pleasure today to be talking with Jason Banks. And Jason Banks is from Tiacs. Tiacs stands for This Is a Conversation Starter. And I love their story. I love what they're doing. I really want to support them and help get the message out there because they just do wonderful stuff. And it's so good to have Jason in on the podcast today. Welcome to the podcast, Jason. Where do we find you today? Where have they got you locked up?
Oh, they've got me locked up at home in Brisbane, where we're based. Tiacs and Trademark are based in Queensland. And it's great to be on your podcast, the Toolshed podcast today, just to probably give more information out there about who we are, what we're doing in this space of mental health, of what you just spoke about with your intro, and how we can support those working in the blue-collar industry and construction and the trades industry when they're having a bit of a challenge, a mental health challenge that they may be experiencing. So looking forward to having a great chat today.
Yeah, me too. How we got started or how we found out about you was through Trademark. I've got the Trademark gear here. We got the hat, my original shirt here. I haven't got it on because I wanted to show you the back of it because it says on the back of it, this is a, if I could get my act together, this is a conversation starter. And here's my new shirt, of course, the flash, brand new
Fantastic.
one. They got them all happening. And yeah, Trademark do a wonderful thing, but they introduced us to you guys, and we found out about your services. And I really want to give the listener to this conversation a depth of understanding of what you do, how they can find you, but also if we can sort of unpack some of the hurdles or challenges people might be going through to even reach out to you. I think, we definitely need to cover that, but it'd be great just to start off with a bit of backstory. How did TX get started? How did you get involved?
Yeah, well, you've got one of the OG's shirts there, Mick, so don't let that go anytime soon. When they bring out those releases, the one-off releases, they never redo them again. So you're holding a sacred shirt there. But I think to talk about TX, I really need to talk about Trademark, and I really need to talk about the story around, how Trademark was started, and then, how then TX was formed. So I guess if I wind the clock back to 2015, in December 2015, a couple of tradies, Ed and Dan. Ed was actually Dan's apprentice on residential building site. They'd actually met the year before, and then Ed had become Dan's apprentice. But they were working on this building site here in Brisbane on this Thursday morning, it was, in December. And Dan received a phone call from his best mate, and his best mate was reaching out just to let him know that with elation that he'd been given the opportunity to start a mature age apprenticeship as a chippy as well. So following in the footsteps of his best mate. And, you know, Dan was over the moon that his best mate had the opportunity to follow in his footsteps. So, you know, the boys, with the elation that they had of that on the Thursday, if I wind the clock forward 3 days, unfortunately, Dan received the phone call that no mate wants to receive. And no loved one, to be honest, is that his best mate had taken his own life here in Brisbane the night before. He received a phone call from his best mate's dad. So the boys went through this elation of finding out this great news around how, and Dan's best mate was also called Dan, so not to get too confused by that, but whenever I say Dan, Dan, but yeah, and then all of a sudden, you know, to find out those news that, you know, that you've lost somebody, and the range of emotions that you go through, and anyone that's experienced loss, whether it's just loss of a loved one, but, you know, definitely through suicide is, you know, what could I have done? What could I have done differently? How did I not see this? Why didn't they reach out? And they went through a whole lot of different emotions. And I guess Ed's role as an apprentice had always relied on Dan, and then all of a sudden things had turned around where Ed actually became Dan's number one support crew. You know, turning up to work, you know, a blubbering mess. He often talks about that, you know, his emotions of, you know, losing his mate. You know, he'd turn up to a work site and he was in tears sitting in the corner. And then Ed became his support crew essentially. And I think that's something that, you know, I'll continue with the story, but I think I just want to touch on that, you know, how critical support crews are, whether you're working in a building site or you're a truckie or you're in farming or whoever. We sort of have to have those people that we can rely on, that, you know, when we're having a bit of a shit day, we can send them a text and say, hey, things aren't quite good today. I need a chat, or hey, have you got time to catch up later on? Or then have a support crew that can actually, you know, keep regular check-ins of people as well. So I think that really played a part in the two boys sort of getting through that initial emotion of, you know, what do we do? How do we get through this together? And that with them, with a couple of, you know, tradies, young guys, and whenever you meet the two boys, you know, they're young entrepreneurs and they're in their 20s when this happened to them. So, you know, quite young. And they often used to think about and talk about it, you know, smokos and lunch breaks of, you know, what can we do differently? How can we change mental health and how it's spoken about, and just start conversations in the blue collar industry and within the trade industry? And, you know, with that, they had a bit of cash saved up with some cashies out there that traditionally tradies have. I don't know how much cash is flying around these days, but back, I think 8 years ago, there was a little bit more cash floating around. And the boys, with their entrepreneur, thought, you know what, we're sick of wearing khaki and blue. You know, what better way to start a conversation than wearing funky high-vis workwear or full print workwear? And with that, 2018, they went out and bought 1,500 work shirts and 2 laptops, and they launched the Trademark Workwear business in 2018. And, you know, they often talk about they had 2 ways that was going to go. One, it was going to go really well for them. And fortunately, I'm still talking to you today. So clearly it's gone great. Or the other one is they were going to be stuck with 1,500 work shirts ranging from size small to 4XL. But
with bizarre colours.
With bizarre colours, but they knew they had their weight gains and losses covered for their career with their work shirts. So yeah, that's how Trademark was established and founded. And you know, I think you know, with them starting the conversations with the workwear, and you know, I'm wearing one today. It's it has the, like you just showed in your one, they have full prints and high vis ones, and you know, they are a conversation starter. I get 2 things when people see me wearing the shirt: is one, love the shirt, don't know anything about it, and then you get the opportunity to start a conversation and tell the story. And then the other one is, I hope they're paying you to wear that shirt. And either way, starts a conversation, and by the end of the conversation, we've just had a conversation around mental health and what their vision is with Trademutt, and essentially what their vision is with
Yeah.
Tiacs as well. So that's the backstory of how it all started with Trademutt, and they've been going now for 5 years. They just had their 5-year anniversary, and we're seeing a lot more shirts out there on work sites, within organisations, jumping on board to support and just start conversations with Funky Shirt Friday or Wacky Wednesday or Tropical Thursday or whatever suits. I think it's all about just starting those conversations out there with those that are struggling.
Yeah, and like you just said, people see you in the shirt, and it does start a conversation. But also, I noticed just a few times of late, like I was in an airport the other day, and somebody had one on. I didn't have mine on at the time, but I still started a conversation with the guy because you know about that, and you kind of you've got that instant mateship because you know about it, you're aware of it. And in getting those conversations started, as you say, is just so terribly important. Continue on with the story, if you would, just about the birth of Tiacs, I suppose. It's a great partnership between you and Trademutt, but I just love the work that you guys are doing, and I want to know how that all came about.
Yeah, well, in 2018 when they launched, I think they were quite surprised on how well it did take off, and but there was something missing. There was this, okay, we're starting conversations, but where can we refer people onto? What's the next step? It's okay to start the conversations, but for someone that's deep down in that hole and is having some challenges, whether it's financially or relationships or with work or whatever it is, how do they access a service, or how do they access support? And there's lots of great organisations out there in Australia, and but probably tending towards the crisis care, and more of that high intervention, and they're probably more seen to be like that as well, even though they might not. So people might be a little bit have hesitations of accessing some of those organisations because they're going, well, I'm not to the point of that crisis, but I do need someone to talk to. So with that, the boys had twofold. There was a twofold approach. One is they wanted to be a social enterprise, workwear business, which means that 50% of their profits from Trademutt need to be donated back to a charity in Australia, and they could have gone down the route of giving it to other mental health organisations and foundations, but sometimes that can get lost in the whole financial thing of lots of money coming in with some of those bigger mental health organisations. But the other thing that was missing was this support of people were reaching out for those conversations, but then they were reaching out also to how do I access support. So with that, in true Ed and Dan form, they just went, you know what, screw this. We're just going to go and start our own non-for-profit organisation. And so if I put it into context, you got to think about these two guys, and they joke about this, so it's okay for me to say it on air, but their highest level of education is a Cert 3 in carpentry, and now
What
they're
more do
now
you
they're
need?
and now they're fashion designers,
Yeah.
designing, producing, merchandise, selling, marketing, and then they go off and go, you know what, we're just going to go and start a non-for-profit organisation in the mental health space. How hard
As
can
you
that
do.
actually be, right? So,
Yeah.
which is, and I think that's what's so powerful about the story is that these guys are two tradies. They've been apprentices. They've been through their whole trade, and then they've gone and wanted to make a real social impact. And so when with them making the decision of going, you know what, we're just going to go and fund the first councillor psych to kick TX off, and TX is the acronym for this is a conversation starter, which is on the back of all the shirts. They just went off and went, you know what, we want to provide free mental health counselling support to the blue collar industry and those that care about them. So that's capturing tradies, it's capturing truckies, it's capturing those that work in the rural farming industries as well. And so anyone that's in that industry, and it's all about getting you in and out as quick as possible. So you know what, you might actually be having a really shit time of, relationship breakdown. It might have only happened in the last week. And often people will hold back on actually seeking support. So they'll actually then go, we'll get further down the track. And that's when you are starting to go and use services like Lifeline and Headspace and those amazing organizations out there. But they formed this to help basically service a need of an industry where there was a gap. They're targeting that industry that, as they say, where does a tradie on a building site go and get a bit of time to themselves? It's the Portaloo. Like it's, if I need,
Wonderful.
or great, not the, I still find it hard to believe that that's where they go, but, or,
It's a shame we
they might,
can't sort of put, the Zoom screen on the back door of the Portaloo and they can just be sitting in there talking to somebody from Tiacs. Like, I'm an ideas man.
well, it's funny you say that about we talk about Portaloos because one of the first things that actually they got a bit of media coverage was that they wanted to get a bit of coverage and awareness out there about who they were doing. So they wrapped a couple of Portaloos in trademark colours, whacked them in the Queen Street Mall, and it just happened that Carl Stefanovic was walking through with a live cross of the Today Show, and they put him on the Today Show, and
Wow.
their whole thing was that they wanted to sit in a Portaloo for 24 hours because they wanted to represent that within the trade industry there are people out there every day that are struggling. We know that it's got a high rate of mental health challenges and suicide. So what can they do to start those conversations? So essentially, Tiacs was born in 2020. We're a free service. We're a relatable service. It's accessed via call or text, so it's really simple. And I guess we just recently, late last year, set out and sat down with the boys to understand, if they had one vision for Tiacs, what is it? And we kept on coming back to this mates thing and the comments about mates and supporting mates. And we pretty much came up with it simply that Tiacs has a vision to be the mental health support service that you tell your mates about. And that's as simple as what it is. And their vision was that one day they're sitting in a pub or they could be sitting in an airport or wherever they're sitting, and they overhear a conversation of two friends, male or female, having a chat about things, and they're struggling mentally, and one of them will turn around and say, hey, there's an organization out there called Tiacs, give them a call. That is their ultimate. That's when they know that they've actually, what they set out to do is actually going to be put into place. So, but yeah, I think the one thing for us is we want to remove that physical barrier associated with accessing mental health support. And when we say physical, you don't have to go and get in a car and go see a GP. You don't have to jump on a mental health care plan. The financial barrier, which is a massive one, especially these days, it's not cheap to go and see a private counsellor for support. So actually taking the financial stress away from that because it's a free service. And the social barrier associated with accessing mental health support within the industry, I think it's getting a lot more spoken about openly, which is great. But I think there still can tend to be that social barrier that, I don't need support. I'm okay. I'll get through this. And being social, that barrier, accessing a support service that you can actually do it confidentially. You don't even have to be telling anybody that you're actually accessing Tiacs. And when you do connect up with the legends here at Tiacs, our counsellors, we offer up to 8 free counselling sessions with no GP referral for those that are in the industry, and it's via call or text. And you might do that over an 8-month period. You might do one session a month over 8 months, or you might go 8 weeks and do one session a week. It's all just determined on where you are at that point of your life. And I think we've got to start to really change. We talk a lot about physical health. We often talk about our physical health, and think about if we were to go to the gym, or we go for a walk, or we're eating healthy for our physical fitness. Think about using Tiacs for your mental fitness. So it might actually mean that you actually might not be having a challenge right now, but oh, you know what? In the next 6 months, I know I'm going to have some challenges come up, whether it's within life that's happening around kids or parenting, and I just want to have some key strategies in place to be able to support me through that. So think about Tiacs as your mental health personal trainer. And like we do with our physical training. So, yeah, I think the boys with a vision of, through adversity of losing a best mate, starting a workwear organization, and then, just going and established an organization like Tiacs. I think it's hats off to them, and it just shows that, no one is alone. And I think one of the key things that is on on all the shirts is it's got the lettering, "You'll never walk alone." Dan's best mate, who did take his own life, was a mad Liverpool supporter. So he lives in honour of us every single day when we wear these shirts. So, and you're not alone, because underneath the left breast pocket of all the shirts, all the latest ones, is a QR code. And if you scan that QR code, you get through to getting free access to Tiacs. So you could be on a job site. You might have a mate that's struggling. You might be struggling yourself, and you're wearing one of these shirts. You just lift that breast pocket up, scan the code, and get straight through to talking to a counsellor. It's really simple and easy.
Yeah, you can't make it any more simple than that. There's a bunch of questions running through my brain, and I hope I get them all out. But the first one is that it's obviously wonderful and very helpful once somebody takes the action to reach out and begins that conversation. But I just wondered if you could perhaps unpack or give us any insight or any ideas as to a skill or an approach when one of your mates is obviously struggling, and what do Australian men do when another guy comes up and says, "Are you okay?" The answer is almost always going to be, "Yeah, no, mate, I'm right." And kind of if you try and push the issue and go, you can talk to me, or the general standard garden variety conversation that ensues.
Yep.
You're trying to help the person, and the person is either embarrassed or in denial or whatever it is. And I just feel that we're getting these messages to start conversations, which is great, and I absolutely support that. I just wonder if there's anything that we can learn, any tools that we can have that make us more valuable, more useful to somebody that might be struggling, to get them from that point to the point where they're actually open to have a conversation with the crew at Tiacs.
Yeah, great question. It's a common asked question that we get a lot of the time, and I think, for myself personally, I often reflect on, my own sort of challenges that I may have had, and, learn off other people that they may have. And I think there's two parts to this. I think one, I think I said at the start, Ed became Dan's support crew. So, making sure that, we're open and honest with our friends or our mates that, hey, you know what, Mick, mate, you're a best mate of mine. I just want to let you know that you're part of my support crew. And letting them know that, and this is before anything may be struggling or anything like that. And you know what? There may be times where I might have to reach out to you, Mick, because things are really, things might not be going so bad. But if you get a text from me, hey, and I need some assistance, all I need to do is I might just need you to give an ear to listen. And I think, the first point of that is just being open and honest about, who is in your support crew. I've got 5 people in my support crew. They all know that they're part of my support crew. What I might talk about with my wife, I might not talk about with my best mate. So having variety in your support crew is great. But I think having those people in place really just gives you that option. And by letting them know that they're part of your support crew, also they'll reciprocate that to go,
Yes.
You're part of my support crew. So you've already opened this conversation indirectly that, when shit goes down, we may need each other. And you all of a sudden have this relationship that's so much more closer. When I did this sort of exercise with talking with, my support crew, my best mate who lives in WA, I haven't seen him in, 3-4 years since COVID. I would talk to him twice a week. And, if I'm having a bad day or things are a bit stressful and I need to have a bit of a debrief, I'll call them. And just like with, Dan and Ed, they're part of my support crew. Working in the industry of mental health, can be quite a challenging, full-on day because we're talking about a subject that a lot of people don't want to talk about. It can become quite, not stressful, but you're taking on people's burdens when they may reach out to you 4 or 5 times, or people in a day might reach out to talk about how they'd been touched by losing a loved one, and you're taking that burden on. So I think the first point is actually having that support crew in place. Um, I think the other thing is, and by having that support crew and being open about that, is showing the word that we often talk about is vulnerability.
Mm.
Being vulnerable, and the boys I know talk about it a lot. I know I talk about it a lot in being vulnerable, and being vulnerable means that we need to be vulnerable to allow others to be vulnerable as well. And by being vulnerable creates a space where I feel comfortable with opening up. And I use this exercise. I talk about this situation that happened sort of last year with me around vulnerability and creating a space. So I had the opportunity to talk to a number of people within an organisation in sort of, to talk about the Tiacs story. And I had 15 minutes to present, and I walked out an hour and 15 minutes later. And the reason why I walked out an hour and 15 minutes later was I think there was 8 in the room plus myself. And when I opened up and talked about the boy story, which I've just done, on the Toolshed podcast today, but also, my own story of, growing up, with a father that served in Vietnam and is still alive today, but, has suffered massive, severe PTSD and still does,
Mm.
didn't really know what mental health was growing up,
Yeah.
And, I often remember when I was 15 and hearing him talk to his brother, which is my uncle, and telling him, we live on rural property, can you get the guns out of the house? And, you don't think about it as a 15-year-old back then around, I just thought he wanted to get, the guns out of the house. But it was probably because, and I know that this is because he's opened up about it since, is that, he was probably going to use them. And, so I think, for me to open up on that story, all of a sudden created a space in this group. And all of a sudden, one of the members of this, who I was presenting to, opened up about and spoke about how they'd been touched by suicide. And then somebody else opened up. And then a third person opened up who was probably the elder statesman of the group, I would say. And, he mentioned about how his grandfather had taken his own life. And, you think about how old he would have been. And, back then it probably wasn't a lot spoken about. And as I was walking out, the leader of the organisation grabbed me and hugged me and said, I've known these guys for 15 years and I've never heard these conversations. I've never heard their stories. And we travel intimately. We see each other on a regular basis. And I just turned around to him and I said, it's the power of vulnerability. By me opening up on my story and the boy story and Trade Mutton Tiacs, created a space that it was a safe space for people to talk.
Mm.
And I think that's the other thing around it, is that we'll never be able to get. I can't compare my story to the boy's story or to your story, Mick, or our listener's story. But just being able to share some of the challenges and being open and honest around some of the challenges that I've experienced could create that space, and does create that space that it's okay to open up. So I think there's a couple of things in there to unpack. Is having a support crew in place is really something that we all have and we all need, and
Mm.
and it could be just one person. Um, if we can start to see some changes in people, like we often know when mental health challenges present themselves, people have a change in mannerism, and it could be just a subtle change. It could be that they're turning late up for work, or that might be that they stop showering, or combing their hair, or some of those sort of changes that they might be experiencing might be just a bit of a light bulb red flag to say, hey, you know what, Mick's not doing too well at the moment. I might just, go and have a chat to him at Smoko and just sort of check in and start a conversation. And, often people might, when you say to them, are you okay? Or, how you feeling? They will close down. But I think if you can start conversations and start to get those conversations a little bit deeper, and, often people think about when we're starting to have a mental health discussion or around somebody, is they're always worried about, what if I say the wrong thing?
Mm.
Um, and I always say you're better off saying something than
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
And all we need to really do is be something that's we can all do really well, and that is listen. And I think if we listen and just listen for, cue signs where someone may be, a bit erratic, and just checking in with them. And it might not be checking in with them, face to face. We've got this technology now that's probably causing some of our mental health challenges, but it's called a mobile phone. And it could be just texting him, checking in with a text. Hey, Mick, mate, sorry I didn't get a chance to catch up with today. Just wanted to just check in to see if everything's going all right. Always here for you, mate, if you ever need it.
Yeah.
That's as simple as what it can be. And then just doing the regular check-ins. But if you are having a conversation with somebody and they do open up, give them the space, give them the time to let them all out, but then do good quality check-ins later, and just sort of say, hey, you know what, that was a great conversation we had today, Mick. I'll check in with you later on today, or I'll check in with you in a couple of days' time, just see how things are. You know that there is a great organisations out there like Tiacs and those other mental health organisations that, if you need that support, check in with them and get that extra support that you may need. So I think there's no wrong or right. I think it's just being open and vulnerable to those close to you.
And what I'm hearing you say also in that is, like, with the vulnerability, I kind of read into that maybe as a leader or a friend or whatever, we might need to lead by example. Like, there's something that we talk about a lot in Black Belt, just from a leadership perspective. It's not, aimed at mental health or anything like that, but it's a thing called the I message, that when you want to have a conversation with somebody because there is a problem, you own the problem and you ask them for their help. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are around that, like beginning a conversation rather than going, are you okay? Potentially going to that person and saying, hey, I wanted to chat with you about something. I might need some help. And maybe if I start doing that from a leadership perspective on a fairly regular basis, it becomes like a cultural thing in our group that it's okay. And if you go first and ask for help and set that example, it makes it okay for other people to open up and ask for help as well. What are your thoughts around that?
Oh, I think you just absolutely nailed it in one. That's magic in a bottle. What you've just said there, Mick, because that's what it's about. It's about us showing the leadership and, taking that on to be able to go and to be able to be open about that. And I think if more of us do that, you're right, there's a cultural shift completely, because all of a sudden, it has that ripple effect. Think about throwing a rock in a pool or in a lake, and all of a sudden there's all these ripple effects that happen within the community. You're the rock getting thrown in when you do that. But it's the ripple effect that you have with others around you that does it. Now, not everyone, will take that on board, and they might not connect with you, or they might not connect with me, but will be somebody, if they take that lead, that they connect into. And there was a day of a year last year, or it's a day every year, it happens around September, that we go out and check in with people. And Ed probably put it the best I'd heard anybody put it last year, and he put it up on one of his social media posts and said, how about we don't need to check in with others today, let's just check in with ourselves. And I think it's got to start with us. It's got to start with us checking in with ourselves to have that health check of, am I okay? Yep, I'm in a good space. Or, you know what, I'm not so good. What do I need to change? And then once you're okay, and I heard this from a really good friend a few years ago, you can't fill other people's cups up on an empty cup yourself.
Yes.
And, it's really about making sure that your cup is full every day, overflowing. And, whether or not that's, through jumping in a pool every single morning through winter because it's great and for the body to get a kickstart, or you go to the gym every week, or you listen to podcasts in the car instead of listening to the radio. We all have different sort of triggers that will actually give us the opportunity to fill that cup up. And for me, I physically train 5 to 6 days a week religiously. I eat a good, healthy diet, but I also go out and splurge when I need to because, we live in a world there where, routine is good, but sometimes you got to break a little bit of routine. But that works for me personally, and it might not work for you. But when your cup is drained, how can you have a conversation, and be present with somebody that may be struggling themselves? And I think that's where it all has to start with us as leaders, or, people that are friends in the community that want to take that approach. So if you take that lead that I'm going to look after myself and I'm going to make sure my cup is full every single day, then that'll allow me to help others to do that. And I think people like yourself that does this podcast, and through your other organizations that you're giving people to, your cup, I get the sense that your cup is full, but we always have some shit days as well. And But yeah, taking that lead, I think, is so critical. And we'll see a change in the community when more and more people take that on.
Yeah. You just mentioned something again that triggered a really, really valuable thought, a lesson that I got from a man by the name of Jim Rohn. He's no longer with us, died some years ago, but was a major influence and mentor for me, in my personal development journey. And he was explaining how one-sided this sort of agreement that most humans have with each other, which is, I'll look after you and you look after me. And he just said it just doesn't work. And you used this phrase just a second ago, I'll look after myself. And he said the key to this is if we have an agreement that if I look after me for you, you look after you for me. And that's that whole cup, and many, many moons ago, before Builder's Business Black Belt was even thought of, we used to do was a 3.5 hour seminar called Coach Any Dummy to Succeed, Even Yourself. And all it was about, in my brain anyway, was about prevention, by standing guard at the entrance to your mind and you determining what comes in based on what you allow in determines how things turn out or how you see things in the future. So, I'm a big, big believer in prevention, and it'd be great to get, the leadership of building businesses and construction businesses to look at processes and programs and activities that we just do every day that are preventative. But another question popped into my head was I know that people will agree that this is a great thing. Glad you exist, all that sort of stuff. But my suspicion is that there is going to be a level of fear of the unknown. Like, what it's like. I'm going to have a meeting with someone. I'm going to have a conversation with someone. I'm going to do something for the first time. I'm not knowing what's going to go on. And that little bit of the fear of the unknown can stop people from taking that first step. So I'd just love you to unpack, if you could, what it looks like, feels like, sounds like, tastes like when they reach out to you the first time, they scan the QR code, whatever they do. What's the process? What will they experience?
Yeah, great question. And, I think about, when somebody is having a bit of a challenge, the first thing they need to do is recognize that, things may not be quite right. The next best thing they can do is go, okay, what am I going to do about that? And, if you've exhausted that support crew or you haven't got a support crew in place, it can be quite daunting. I'd hate to see the stats of somebody that's probably booked in to go see their GP to jump on a mental health care plan. They've jumped in the car, they've sat in the driveway, and they haven't driven out because there's that fear of, what do I say when I walk in? How does that conversation start? And I think what we've been able to do with Tiacs is, remove that barrier. So, if somebody is struggling, we get these texts regularly. It could be just, hey, you know what? It could be myself. Hey, I'm struggling right now. I don't feel comfortable talking. Can we do this counselling session via text, or can we do this conversation via text? So all of a sudden, there's that barrier around not picking up a phone and going, well, what do I say to the other person on the other end that I don't know? And so there's that one. There's an option there for people to be able to do that. The other one is we get a lot of is where people will turn around and go, you know what, I don't know what to say when I ring the phone. Can someone call me back? And by having someone call you back, you're not actually instigating the conversation.
Yeah.
Our intake officers, our counsellors are actually who are trained will actually start that conversation with you. And I think the bravest of brave, that's the step that they need to get through, because one, they've highlighted that I'm having a challenge right now and I need to get support. Two, I'm going to go out and get support. But then three, there's a big difference between 2 and 3, because knowing that you're going to go out and reach support and actually doing it, is really the step change for somebody. And I think it's like anything. We all know it's the fear of the unknown of, I've never done this before. And 70% of our clients that have reached out in 2.5 years or close to 3 years have never reached out to mental health support service before, which blows our mind. But it probably also cements that by having a service that is free, it's confidential, and there's a tech service, they're actually removing those barriers, and it's a lot more comfortable for people to open up. And I think once you do open up, whether it's by call or text, an intake officer will take your call or your text, and they'll have a conversation with you. So they'll have a chat to you, Mick, and say, hey, what's been happening? What are some of your challenges? And just have a general conversation with you to understand, okay, what can we do to be able to support you? When can we get you in for your session? And normally we can get somebody in for a counselling session within 7 days. At the moment, to get into a session with a professional privately, I heard the other day that people are waiting until November at the moment, because so for someone that needs that support now, generally we can get them booked in within 7 days, and then they'll be hooked up with a counsellor, and a session will normally run for about 45 minutes, and you might only want to have a chat today. It might be, I just had a really shit day today, and I needed someone to talk to. I needed someone to, get all this feeling that I've got on my chest. I need to get off it. And you might just jump on board just for one conversation and one counselling session. Yep. Or you might end up going, hey, you know what, I need a little bit more. And the counsellor who's trained will guide you through that. The other thing as well, that to give listeners the confidence that, you actually get the same counsellor for all your sessions. So you actually aren't getting a different counsellor each week, and then you've got to go and relive either your story or, what's happening. I see the beauty about the tech service. What's so good about that is the conversation that you're having with a counsellor. You might have a session at night. We operate from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday to Friday, but you might be having a counselling session at 9 o'clock at night, and you've just had it via text. You're feeling pretty good because we all know when we open up on things, all of a sudden things just change in our body where the weight's just been lifted off our shoulders because we've actually had the opportunity to get something out. It happens to me every single day. I might be struggling on some project that I'm working on, and all of a sudden I talk to my peer about it, and all of a sudden I think, you know what, it's not so bad now. I feel pretty good. By doing a tech session, and you wake up the next morning and, the counsellor's giving you strategies and a bit of stuff to work on over the next week and some goal setting or some therapeutic strategies to work through. You've got all the notes there on your phone, ready to go. So that's the beauty about having a tech service available for you. But I think knowing that you're going to get the same counsellor for all your sessions, if you don't feel comfortable enough, just send a text. It could be, hey, can somebody call me back? And you could actually be reaching out for a loved one. So it could actually be that my wife, or it might be knowing that I'm struggling personally, and I'm not the sort of guy that's going to open up on the phone, she might reach out to Tiacs and say, hey, you know what, my partner's struggling at the moment, or my husband's struggling at the moment. He's given the okay for you to use it, to give him a call on his number. Can you give him a call for me, please? So we're taking every single barrier away from somebody actually taking that step of reaching out.
Yeah. I really love your thoughts on this because, I'm, as I've already said, I'm into prevention and that sort of approach. And I assume that the sort of deeper and darker things get for somebody, the more likely they are to retract into their cave, go into their cave, and it's just more difficult to get them out. So I just wondered if you could shed any light or help us understand what might be a thought process or a feeling that it's not the end of the world. I'm not under the pump. I'm not, got crazy thoughts or anything like that. But at what stage of what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling would be a good time to reach out to Tiacs, so I don't get to that point where I'm just that far into the cave that I'm not coming out again?
Yeah, as soon as you feel that point, exactly what you just said, I think the deeper and deeper that they get, and one of the things that is often spoke about is when, unfortunately, when someone does take their own life, everybody around them is in shock. I didn't see it coming, or they didn't give me any signs. They become very good at hiding feelings. They end up become very good at putting that mask on where nobody sees through that, and we often hear about that all the time. We hear about that. I think when or you start to see, whether it's you reaching out for a mate, that you start to see some of those changes, because those changes are the key sign to actually going, something's not quite right. If you let those changes over time set in, then it just becomes the norm, or they'll become very good at masking it, or you become very good at masking it. So reaching out when it could be, I'm having some real struggles with my relationship at the moment. I'm not feeling myself. I'm liking what I'm doing, but I'm not loving what I'm doing, if that makes sense. So it could be something that's happening at work. It could be a relationship that you have with somebody at work. It could be something with your kids. I'm really struggling to, deal with my kids at the moment. They're driven by this thing called social media that's, affecting all of us in different ways. But it really just picking up on that initial sign when you feel it in your gut, or you feel it in your mind where, I need to take some time out. It's getting too much for me. That is the trigger point to go, I need to get some support. Now, it might not be reaching out to Tiacs. We've said, as I've mentioned so far in the podcast, it could be just reaching out. Often I will ring, Dan or Ed and, hey guys, I'm snowed under at the moment. I'm really struggling. Can we just walk through and just have a chat about, where my head's at the moment? By the end of the conversation, everything's back on track, and I'm thinking back going, you know what, it wasn't that bad. Maybe I was over dramatizing things or looking at things in a different way, and they've given me some strategies to work on. So I think as soon as you feel, and that things aren't quite right, but also if that things aren't going to be quite right, that maybe financially you're going to be having some challenges in the next 6 months, or that if you're a truck driver or you're a FIFO worker, that you're away from your loved ones for a long period of time. How do maybe I need to reach out now to get some strategies in place before I go into this new job around how do I manage isolation, for instance. So it's actually just that trigger point when in the gut I feel, or in the mind where it's like, you know what, shit just doesn't feel too good at the moment. I need to reach out. That is the trigger point. And as I said, people might only just reach out for that one session, because at the end of one session they're going, you know what, I feel pretty good now. I'm back on track. Or it might mean that I need some more sessions to get me through.
Yeah. And again, you say stuff and it creates questions in my mind. You said you reach out to Ed or Dan, and this is going on and that's going on. And I just thought, could you touch on the value of and you said this right at the start of the conversation of listening, and that there's a big difference, because I know that we do sessions on this in Black Belt all of the time. Is genuine, level 5 listening is listening with the intent to understand, without judgment and without offering advice. That's the good stuff. And so, can you just talk to that about if somebody is opening up to you? How important is it to not jump in with some suggestions and solutions and advice and just sit there and be the big flappy pair of ears and go,
Yep.
and just try and get more and more and more from them without even going anywhere near a solution or advice? How important is that?
Well, I think the first point is actually creating an environment and a space where distractions aren't going to come into the conversation. You
Yep.
know, you're not going to raise the conversation in a group of people. It could be, always think about first. I always think about, where am I? What's the environment that I'm in? So making sure that the environment, I'm not going to have people walking in on the conversation, because it'll end up just getting distracted, and the individual will just feel like, well, somebody else is coming into this conversation. I'm not going to open up. So environment is key.
Yep.
The number 2 one for me is always never say to somebody, I know what you're going through.
Yes.
Because you actually don't.
No.
What my experience is through what a challenge I may have had is could be completely different to what you're going through right at this moment, Mick. So for me, that's the number 2 thing, is never say, I know what you're going through, because they're going to sit there and go, actually, well, you actually don't know what I'm going through, because you actually don't know the full story, or you're not walking in my shoes at the moment. The other one that people, and I know this could be really, basic and that, but making sure that this thing called a mobile phone is not turned on and is not
Yes.
near us as a distraction. So it's another distraction. So all of a sudden the phone rings, and you're wanting to chat to this person, but then they're thinking, well, you're not fully committed into this relationship in this conversation right now. So, that's number 3. Number 4 is just to listen, just to offer a pair of ears. Don't offer advice, as you say. This is because, we don't understand fully what they may be going through. It might be, okay, yep, cool. And it might be asking some leading questions a little bit more around, how's that making you feel at the moment? Is there other things that, that could be impacting this, but not actually offering advice on how to fix the situation is key. And then in the end is just sort of going, asking the question of, well, then how can I support you?
Yep.
That'll be the magic question that you ask. And, how can I support you? What can I do to support you? Or what can I do to help you? I'm here for you. And it could be a matter of, they might go, well, actually, I don't know. And it could be, well, that's when you could offer some suggestions. Well, hey, would it be beneficial if I had a regular check-in process in with you, and I check in with you on a regular basis? Or, is it okay if I, get a number for you that you may be able to reach out to, through different organisations, Then the last thing is actually, and this is the big one, is the trust factor. You've just had a real intimate conversation with somebody. The last thing that you need to be doing is going and telling the bosses or other people, other mates around that you just had this conversation with them. Because the reason why they opened up with you and might not have been their colleague or their mate down the road was because they felt that you created the environment and the trust to be able to have that conversation. And as soon as you walk away and have that conversation with somebody else, now you might turn around and say, you know what, Mick, hey, mate, not a lot I can really help at the moment, but I know that Dan would be really open to a conversation. Would that be something that would be of interest? And then they've got the opportunity to go, you know what, no, I don't feel really comfortable with that. Or, hey, yeah, that's a great idea. Maybe I'll take that on board. And then all of a sudden you've got their approval to do that. The last thing you want to be doing is going, and I go and tell Dan and say, hey, Mick's struggling. And Dan comes up to you and goes, hey, Mick, I heard you were struggling.
Yeah.
And you're like, I thought I had that conversation with Jace, and it was 100% confidential, and he wasn't going to say anything, and he goes and says something. So for me, the environment is such a key thing, but also just listening, not offering judgment, not offering direct up solutions from the start until you actually got the opportunity. But that regular check-in is a real key thing, because that will then give them the trust that you've got their back. You're there to support them through whatever their challenge that they may be going through.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And I think that just listening to our conversation and just heightening the awareness of what could possibly be going on around us on a building site or a construction site or in the office or wherever is going to make a power of difference. I love your enthusiasm. I love your commitment. I love what Tiacs are doing. What I would love for people to do, listening and watching our conversation, you'll either be seeing it on Facebook or LinkedIn or Facebook. I'd love you to make a comment and put some comments in about what you've thought about our conversation, any suggestions you've got. What I'd love you to do is absolutely share the shit out of this. Like, hit the share button and get this conversation in front of as many people as possible, because all it will take is potentially one share to send it to that one person. They watch it and they're in that space and they decide to give Tiacs a call. And you have changed somebody's life by just clicking a couple of buttons on your computer or your phone. So please make the comments, share this thing like crazy, so more and more people are aware of Tiacs, because they are doing absolutely amazing stuff. And we've just got to have more people in the construction industry or in the blue collar space aware of the existence and the great work that these people are doing, and supporting them as well by donating and so forth. So we're going to have in the comments, in the description, there'll be the website, any other contact details that Jason gives me, so you'll be able to just go straight to there and hook up, make a donation, or use their services. It doesn't matter as long as we're creating awareness of this incredible support platform. Jason, thank you so much for putting the time aside, being so generous, being so committed, so enthusiastic with what you do. You're doing amazing things, and it's been an absolute privilege having you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mick, and to all the listeners out there, thanks for listening. And, I would love everybody to just go and access the Tiacs service. And if one person, maybe having a challenge today when they're listening to this and goes, now's the time for me to reach out, and they do this, that is music and would make my heart sing, knowing that somebody from this podcast has reached out to Tiacs to get mental health support. So thanks to all the listeners out there, and thanks to the work you're doing also, Mick. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason. Don't forget to get on the TradeMut site and get your TradeMut gear as well, because it's just a wonderful tool to be able to start these conversations and create more awareness of what's going on and the challenges and the opportunities that Tiacs provide to sort things out. So it's been terrific. Thanks very much, Jason. That's it for this episode of The Tool Shed. I hope you got some inspiration from it. I genuinely hope and plead with you to hit the share button, make some comments, give us your thoughts, share this with anyone and everyone that is in your circle of contacts. The more people that know about this, the more opportunity we've got to change people's lives for the better, save people's lives. It's so important. Please play your part. Jump on the Tiacs website, make a donation, help support this incredible cause. That's it for this this episode of The Tool Shed. I'm Mick Hawes from Builders Business Black Belt. We'll be back again with another episode of The Tool Shed before you know it. That is all. Bye for now.